My life was a symphony of routine, a comfortable rhythm I both cherished and, if I were honest with myself, sometimes found a little predictable. I was an architect, a profession that suited my methodical nature, my love of structure and design. My days were filled with blueprints, meetings, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing a project come to fruition, a tangible representation of my vision. My evenings were spent in the warm glow of our home, a place of shared laughter and quiet companionship. My wife, Vivian, was a constant in this harmonious composition. She was a vibrant, artistic soul, a painter whose canvases were filled with bold colors and abstract forms. We complemented each other, I the steady line, she the burst of creativity. We had built a life together, a life I believed was strong, built on a foundation of mutual respect and affection. We had friends, a close-knit group who shared our values and enjoyed our company. We hosted dinner parties, went on weekend trips, celebrated milestones together. From the outside, I'm sure we appeared to have it all. And for a long time, I believed we did. Our home was a reflection of our shared aesthetic. It was a renovated Victorian, with high ceilings, large windows that let in ample light, and a mix of modern and antique furniture. Vivian's paintings adorned the walls, adding splashes of color to the neutral tones. We had a small garden in the back, a tranquil space where Vivian would often sit and paint, while I relaxed with a book and a glass of wine. We talked about the future, about maybe one day starting a family, but it was a conversation that always seemed to remain on the periphery, a distant possibility rather than an immediate plan. Not that I minded. I was content with our life as it was. I believed Vivian was too, or at least that's what I told myself. This sense of contentment, this belief in the solidity of our world, was shattered so subtly, so unexpectedly, that it felt like a rug had been pulled out from under me. It started with something insignificant, a misplaced phone. Vivian had left her phone at home one morning, something she rarely did. I noticed it on the kitchen counter after she had left for her studio. I didn't think much of it at the time, just assumed she would come back for it later. But she didn't, and when I tried to reach her, it went straight to voicemail. I thought it was odd, but I shrugged it off. I was busy with work, and I didn't have time to dwell on it. It wasn't until later that evening, when Vivian still hadn't returned and her phone was still on the counter, that a small, unsettling feeling began to creep into my mind. I picked up her phone, intending to call her again, when I noticed a notification. It was a message that wasn't addressed to me. And it was a message that would change everything. The message on Vivian's phone was short, seemingly innocuous, yet it sent a chill down my spine. It read, "Looking forward to tonight. Can't wait." It was signed with a single initial, J. My heart started to pound in my chest. Who was J? And what was tonight? A wave of unease washed over me. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a message from a friend, a colleague, but something about the tone, the secretive nature of it, made me uneasy. I unlocked Vivian's phone. I know, it was a breach of privacy, but I couldn't help myself, and scrolled through her messages. I found a series of exchanges with the same initial, J. The messages were coded, filled with innuendo and veiled references that, while not explicitly damning, painted a picture that made my blood run cold. They spoke of secret meetings, stolen moments, and a longing to be together. My stomach churned. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Vivian, my wife, the woman I trusted, the woman I loved, was having an affair. The thought was so foreign, so incongruous with the image I had of her, of us, that it felt like a cruel joke. But the messages were there, undeniable, staring me in the face. I read through them again and again, each word a dagger twisting in my heart. The more I read, the more the pieces started to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I remembered Vivian's recent late nights at her studio, her sudden trips out of town, her increasingly distant demeanor. I had attributed it to her artistic temperament, her need for space and inspiration. How blind I had been. The initial shock began to give way to a burning rage. I felt betrayed, humiliated. How could she do this to me? To us? Had our entire relationship been a lie? I thought of all the times we had laughed together, shared our dreams, our fears. Had it all been an act? The thought made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal. I needed to know who Jay was, and how long this had been going on. I closed Vivian's phone, my hands shaking. I felt like my world had been turned upside down. The comfortable rhythm of my life had been shattered, replaced by a discordant cacophony of pain and anger. I knew in that moment that things would never be the same. The trust was broken, perhaps irrevocably, and a dark, unsettling feeling began to take root in my heart, a feeling that whispered of revenge. The following days were a blur of agonizing uncertainty. I went through the motions of my life, attending meetings, working on projects, but my mind was elsewhere. I was consumed by the mystery of Jay, by the need to uncover the identity of Vivian's lover. I felt like a detective in a noir film, obsessively piecing together clues, following every lead. I started paying closer attention to Vivian's interactions, her phone calls, her casual mentions of friends and colleagues. I scoured her social media, looking for any hint, any connection. The more I investigated, the more I realized the depth of Vivian's deception. It wasn't just Jay. There were others. There was M, who sent her cryptic messages about our little secret and the thrill of the forbidden. There was P, whose texts were filled with suggestive emojis and veiled references to shared experiences. My world, once so secure, now felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. The betrayal was multifaceted, a tangled web of lies and deceit. It wasn't just the physical infidelity that hurt. It was the emotional betrayal, the realization that the woman I shared my life with had been living a double life, a life I wasn't a part of. One name, however, stood out among the others: Mark. Mark was a close friend, a colleague I had known for years. We had worked on projects together, shared meals, even gone on double dates with our wives. The thought of him and Vivian together made me sick to my stomach. It was a violation of trust on so many levels. I remembered a recent dinner party we had hosted. Vivian and Mark had been unusually animated, their laughter a little too loud, their glances a little too lingering. I had dismissed it at the time, attributing it to the convivial atmosphere. Now I saw it in a different light. Their easy banter, their shared jokes, it all seemed like a cruel mockery of my ignorance. The realization that the betrayal extended beyond a single affair, that it involved people I knew and trusted, deepened the wound. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies, unable to find my footing. The pain was relentless, a constant ache in my chest. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was a ghost haunting my own life. The comfortable routine I had once cherished now felt like a prison, a constant reminder of what I had lost. And the seed of revenge, planted in the fertile ground of my pain, began to sprout, its tendrils reaching deep into my soul. The initial shock and disbelief gradually gave way to a seething rage. It was a visceral, all-consuming anger that pulsed through my veins, coloring my every thought and action.
I felt violated, humiliated, stripped bare.
The life I had built, the love I had believed in, it all seemed like a cruel illusion. The betrayal was not just a personal affront. It was a shattering of my worldview, a fundamental shift in my understanding of trust and loyalty. I withdrew from the world, isolating myself from friends and family. I couldn't bear the thought of their pity, their well-meaning but ultimately empty platitudes. I couldn't bring myself to confide in anyone, to share the burden of my pain. I was trapped in my own personal hell, my thoughts circling endlessly around Vivian's betrayal. I replayed every interaction, every conversation, searching for clues I might have missed, for signs of the deception that had been unfolding right under my nose. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Nights were spent tossing and turning, my mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. I would drift off only to be jolted awake by nightmares, vivid images of Vivian and her lovers, their laughter echoing in the darkness. Days were no better. I would go through the motions of my work, but my focus was gone. My once sharp mind felt clouded, my creativity stifled. The joy I had once found in my profession had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell. I started drinking heavily, seeking solace in the numbing embrace of alcohol. It provided a temporary escape, a brief respite from the relentless pain. But the relief was fleeting, and the mornings were filled with regret and self-loathing. I knew I was spiraling downwards, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. I was caught in a vortex of despair, pulled deeper and deeper into the abyss. The anger, however, refused to be drowned. It simmered beneath the surface, fueled by my pain and my growing sense of injustice. I felt like a victim, wronged and betrayed, and a primal instinct, a deep-seated desire for retribution, began to take hold. I wanted to hurt them, to make them feel the same pain they had inflicted on me. I wanted them to pay for their actions. The seed of revenge, once a mere whisper, now grew into a powerful force, threatening to consume me entirely. The desire for revenge became my sole focus, a twisted obsession that consumed my every waking moment. I was no longer interested in understanding why Vivian had betrayed me, or in salvaging any remnants of our relationship. All that mattered was making them pay. I wanted to inflict pain, to cause suffering, to dismantle their lives with the same meticulous precision I applied to my architectural designs. I began to observe them, like a predator stalking its prey. I followed Vivian discreetly, keeping a safe distance. I noted her routines, her habits, the places she frequented. I learned the schedules of her lovers, their work patterns, their social circles. I gathered information, compiling a dossier of their secrets, their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses. Technology became my ally. I installed spyware on Vivian's phone, granting me access to her messages, her calls, her location. I hacked into their email accounts, reading their intimate correspondence, their private confessions. I felt a perverse sense of satisfaction as I delved into their lives, uncovering their hidden desires, their carefully constructed facades. The more I learned, the more my anger grew. I discovered that Vivian's affair with Mark had been going on for months, their clandestine meetings taking place in hotels, in their offices, even in our own home while I was away. I learned about her other lovers, their roles in her life, their tangled relationships with one another. The web of deceit was more intricate, more depraved than I could have ever imagined. But my anger was not blind. It was cold, calculated, focused. I didn't want to resort to physical violence, to crude acts of aggression. My revenge would be more sophisticated, more insidious. I would use their own secrets against them, turning their lies into weapons, their trust into a trap. I would exploit their vulnerabilities, their insecurities, their deepest fears. I would destroy their careers, their reputations, their relationships. I would make them regret the day they ever crossed me. The planning was meticulous, every detail carefully considered. I mapped out my strategy, anticipating their reactions, their countermoves. I became a puppet master, pulling the strings, orchestrating their downfall. I knew the risks involved, the potential consequences of my actions. But I didn't care. I was driven by a single-minded purpose, a burning desire for vengeance that eclipsed all other considerations. I was no longer the man I once was. I had become something else, something darker, something more dangerous. I had become an instrument of retribution, a force to be reckoned with. My plan was not about a single, explosive act of revenge. It was about a slow, methodical dismantling of their lives, a carefully orchestrated campaign of destruction. I would chip away at their foundations, erode their confidence, and sow seeds of discord among them. I would turn their own betrayals against them, using their secrets as weapons. I started with subtle manipulations, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion. I would drop hints, make veiled references, create situations that would lead them to question each other's motives and loyalties. I exploited their insecurities, their fears of exposure, their anxieties about the consequences of their actions. I watched as their relationships began to fray, their trust eroded by the constant undercurrent of suspicion. I used my knowledge of their work to undermine their professional lives. I leaked confidential information, sabotaged projects, and spread rumors about their incompetence. I watched as their careers began to crumble, their reputations tarnished. The satisfaction I derived from their downfall was a bittersweet poison, a temporary balm for my wounded soul. I also targeted their social circles, exposing their hypocrisy and their lies. I revealed their affairs to their friends, their families, their colleagues. I watched as their carefully constructed facades crumbled, their social standing diminished. The whispers, the gossip, the averted glances. It was all music to my ears. But my most potent weapon was their own guilt. I played on their consciences, their remorse, their fear of being exposed. I sent them anonymous messages, reminding them of their transgressions, their betrayals. I watched as they became consumed by paranoia, their lives unraveling under the weight of their own secrets. The execution of my plan was exhilarating. I felt a sense of control, a mastery over their fates. I was the architect of their destruction, the puppet master pulling the strings. But there was also a growing sense of unease, a nagging feeling that I was crossing a line. The revenge, once a righteous pursuit, was starting to feel like an addiction, a compulsion I couldn't control. I was losing myself in the process, becoming a reflection of the very people I sought to punish. My manipulations began to bear fruit. The seeds of doubt I had sown were taking root, growing into a tangled web of suspicion and mistrust. Vivian and her lovers, once so confident in their deception, were now looking over their shoulders, questioning every word, every glance. Their carefully constructed facades were beginning to crack. Mark, the friend I had once trusted, became increasingly agitated. He was a man who thrived on control, on order. The uncertainty, the suspicion, it was eating away at him. He started making mistakes at work, his performance slipping. He became withdrawn, irritable, his easy charm replaced by a nervous tension. I watched him unravel, a grim satisfaction growing within me. M, who I discovered was a married woman named Melissa, a prominent lawyer, was also feeling the pressure. Her clandestine affair with Vivian had been a dangerous game, a thrill she had enjoyed until the stakes became too high. Now she was terrified of exposure, of the damage it would do to her career, her family. She started distancing herself from Vivian, her messages becoming less frequent, less passionate. He, a younger man named Pierre who worked in the same art gallery as Vivian, was the most vulnerable of the three. He was naive, easily manipulated. I fed him misinformation, playing on his insecurities, his fear of losing Vivian. I watched as he became possessive, jealous, his infatuation with Vivian turning into an unhealthy obsession. The dynamic between them shifted. The camaraderie, the shared complicity, was replaced by a simmering tension. They began to turn on each other, their alliances fracturing. Vivian, once the confident orchestrator of her own desires, was now caught in the crossfire, her carefully constructed web of deceit unraveling around her. I observed it all from a distance, a silent puppet master pulling the strings. Their pain was my fuel, their suffering my reward. But even as I reveled in their downfall, a part of me felt a twinge of guilt. Was I going too far? Was I becoming the very monster I despised? I pushed the doubts aside. They had made their choices, they had to face the consequences. And I, the wronged husband, the betrayed friend, would be the instrument of their justice. My manipulations became bolder, more audacious. I was no longer content with simply sowing seeds of discord. I wanted to orchestrate their downfall, to engineer their public humiliation. I wanted them to feel the full weight of their betrayal, the shame and the disgrace. I started with Mark. I knew he was working on a major project, a prestigious commission that was crucial to his career. I also knew he had been cutting corners, taking risks to meet the tight deadlines. I anonymously alerted the authorities, providing them with evidence of his unethical practices. The investigation that followed was swift and devastating. Mark was publicly reprimanded, his reputation tarnished, his career in ruins. I watched as he crumbled, his arrogance replaced by despair, his confidence shattered. Melissa, the lawyer, was my next target. I knew she had been involved in some shady dealings, bending the rules to win cases, exploiting loopholes for personal gain. I gathered evidence of her misconduct, meticulously documenting her transgressions. Then, I anonymously sent the information to the Bar Association, triggering a disciplinary hearing. Melissa, once a respected figure in the legal community, was now facing disbarment, her career hanging by a thread. The fear in her eyes, the desperation in her voice, it was a sight I relished. Pierre, the young gallery assistant, was the easiest to manipulate. He was infatuated with Vivian, blinded by his desire. I played on his emotions, feeding him lies about Vivian's intentions, her supposed plans to leave him. I watched as his jealousy grew, his obsession spiraling out of control. He started stalking Vivian, harassing her, making her life a living hell. The police were called, restraining orders were issued. Pierre, once a carefree young man, was now a pariah, his life in shambles. The downfall of Vivian's lovers was a symphony of destruction, a carefully orchestrated masterpiece of revenge. I watched as their lives imploded, their careers shattered, their reputations tarnished. The satisfaction was intoxicating, a potent drug that dulled the pain of my own betrayal. But it was also a dangerous game, a path that led to darkness. I was losing myself in the process, becoming a prisoner of my own vengeance. The intricate web Vivian had woven was disintegrating thread by thread. Mark, stripped of his career and public image, was a shell of his former self. He retreated into a haze of alcohol, his ambition and drive replaced by bitterness and self-pity. Melissa, facing disbarment and the scorn of her peers, was fighting a losing battle. Her carefully cultivated image of power and control had shattered, leaving her vulnerable and exposed. Pierre, consumed by jealousy and paranoia, had become a danger to himself and others. His obsession with Vivian had turned into a destructive force, leaving a trail of wreckage in its wake. Vivian, once the confident manipulator, was now the one being manipulated. She was caught in the crossfire of my revenge, her lovers turning on each other, their accusations and recriminations echoing around her. The thrill of her secret life had evaporated, replaced by fear and uncertainty. She was losing control, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I watched her struggle, her vibrant spirit dimmed, her laughter silenced. The guilt was eating away at her, the weight of her betrayals crushing her spirit. She tried to reach out to me, to explain, to apologize. But I remained distant, unmoved. Her words were hollow, her remorse insincere. I had no desire to forgive, no intention of reconciliation. The only satisfaction I could find was in her suffering, in the knowledge that she was paying the price for her actions. The once close-knit group of friends was now fractured beyond repair. The trust was broken, the bonds severed. Suspicion and resentment poisoned their interactions, their shared history tainted by betrayal and deceit. They avoided each other, their gatherings replaced by awkward silences and strained conversations. The social fabric that had once held them together was torn apart, leaving them isolated and alone. I observed it all with a detached satisfaction. The chaos I had created was a testament to my power, my control. I had become the architect of their destruction, the puppet master pulling the strings. But even as I reveled in their downfall, a nagging question lingered in the back of my mind. Was this justice, or was it simply vengeance? Was I any better than the people I had sought to punish? The lines were blurring, the boundaries between victim and perpetrator becoming increasingly indistinct. The time had come for the final act, the crescendo of my carefully orchestrated symphony of revenge. Vivian, stripped of her lovers, her friends, her reputation, was now a shadow of her former self. The vibrant, confident woman I had once known was gone, replaced by a hollow shell, haunted by guilt and regret. But her suffering was not yet complete. I had one more card to play, one final blow to deliver. I chose my moment carefully. It was the annual gala for the art gallery where Vivian worked, a prestigious event attended by the who's who of the art world. Vivian, despite her personal turmoil, was still a respected artist. Her work admired by critics and collectors alike. This night was to be her moment of triumph, a celebration of her talent and success. I would turn it into her public downfall. I arrived at the gala alone, dressed impeccably, a mask of composure concealing the turmoil within. I mingled with the guests, exchanging pleasantries, observing Vivian from a distance. She was radiant, her smile brittle, her eyes betraying the anxiety that gnawed at her. She was surrounded by admirers, their praise ringing hollow in the face of the impending storm. As the evening progressed, I discreetly planted my final seed. I had created a website, a digital monument to Vivian's infidelity. It contained all the evidence I had gathered. The messages, the emails, the photos, the videos. It was a detailed chronicle of her betrayals, a damning indictment of her character. I waited for the opportune moment. Then I anonymously sent the link to every guest at the gala, their phones buzzing with the notification. The effect was immediate and devastating. Whispers spread like wildfire, conversations hushed, glances averted. Vivian, oblivious to the unfolding drama, continued to bask in the attention of her admirers. Then someone showed her the website. The blood drained from her face, her smile faltering, her eyes widening in horror. The realization of what was happening, the full extent of my revenge, hit her like a tidal wave. The room fell silent, all eyes on Vivian. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. The shame was overwhelming, the humiliation unbearable. She fled the gala, her reputation in tatters, her career in ruins. The guests, shocked and disgusted, quickly followed suit, the once vibrant event dissolving into chaos. I watched it all unfold, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. Vivian's public downfall was complete, her life irrevocably shattered. The revenge I had craved, the justice I had sought was finally mine. But the victory felt hollow, the satisfaction tainted by a growing sense of emptiness. I had destroyed her, but in doing so, I had also destroyed a part of myself. The aftermath of the gala was swift and brutal. Vivian, once a rising star in the art world, was now a pariah. Her reputation was in tatters, her name synonymous with scandal and betrayal. Galleries canceled her exhibitions, collectors withdrew their support, and critics condemned her in scathing reviews. Her career, built on years of hard work and dedication, was effectively over. The social fallout was equally devastating. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the disgraced artist. Invitations dried up, phone calls went unanswered, and her once vibrant social life dwindled to nothing. She was ostracized, shunned, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. The media frenzy was relentless. Newspapers and tabloids splashed her story across their pages, reveling in the salacious details of her infidelity. Online forums buzzed with gossip and speculation, her name dragged through the mud. The public humiliation was complete, her privacy violated, her dignity stripped away. Vivian retreated into seclusion, hiding from the prying eyes of the world. She moved out of our home, leaving behind the life we had built together. I didn't try to stop her. There was nothing left to salvage, no hope of reconciliation. The trust was irrevocably broken, the love replaced by bitterness and resentment. I watched her disappear from my life, a ghost of the woman I had once loved. The pain of her betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But it was overshadowed by a growing sense of emptiness, a realization that my revenge had come at a steep price. I had destroyed her, but in doing so, I had also destroyed a part of myself. The world saw me as the wronged husband, the victim of her infidelity. They offered their sympathy, their condolences, their praise for my strength and resilience. But their words rang hollow. I knew the truth. I was not the innocent victim they believed me to be. I was the architect of her downfall, the orchestrator of her destruction. And the guilt, the knowledge of what I had done, weighed heavily on my soul. The whispers started subtly. At first, it was just a feeling, a sense of unease that settled over me whenever I entered a room. Conversations would abruptly halt, Glances would linger a little too long, and a palpable tension would hang in the air. I knew they were talking about me, speculating about my role in Vivian's downfall. The rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by the lingering questions surrounding the gala incident. How had the website been created? Who had leaked the information? Who had orchestrated the public humiliation with such precision and malice? Suspicion naturally fell on me, the wronged husband, the one with the most to gain from Vivian's downfall. Friends and acquaintances started to distance themselves, their sympathy replaced by a wary curiosity. Invitations became less frequent, conversations more guarded. I could feel their eyes on me, assessing, judging, wondering if I was capable of such calculated cruelty. The police also took an interest. They questioned me about the website, the leaked information, the events of the gala. I maintained my innocence, denying any involvement in the matter. They had no concrete evidence against me, no proof of my actions. But the suspicion lingered, a dark cloud hanging over my head. I became a pariah, ostracized by the very people who had once offered their support. The isolation was suffocating, the silence deafening. I was trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, surrounded by the ghosts of my past. The revenge I had craved, the justice I had sought, had come at a steep price. I had destroyed Vivian, but in doing so, I had also destroyed myself. The world saw me as a victim, but I knew the truth. I was the perpetrator, the architect of my own downfall. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The consequences of my actions were inescapable, the price of my revenge too high to pay. The isolation deepened. My once thriving architectural practice dwindled as clients, sensing the controversy surrounding me, took their business elsewhere. The phone stopped ringing, emails went unanswered, and the once bustling office fell silent. My colleagues, once friendly and supportive, now kept their distance, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and suspicion. I tried to focus on my work, to lose myself in the intricate details of design and construction. But the joy was gone, replaced by a gnawing sense of futility. Every project felt like a reminder of the life I had lost, the career I had destroyed. The buildings I once envisioned with such passion now seemed like empty shells, devoid of meaning or purpose. My nights were filled with insomnia, my days with a crushing sense of loneliness. The alcohol, once a temporary escape, now became a constant companion, numbing the pain, blurring the edges of reality. I wandered the streets of Kiev, a ghost haunting my own city, invisible to the crowds that bustled around me. The few friends who remained loyal tried to reach out, to offer a helping hand. But I pushed them away, unable to face their pity, their judgment. I was trapped in a cycle of self-destruction, my guilt and remorse fueling my isolation. One evening, as I wandered aimlessly through the deserted streets, I found myself drawn to the opera house. The lights were on, the building humming with activity. I remembered the many times Vivian and I had attended performances there, sharing a love of music and theater. A wave of nostalgia washed over me, a bittersweet reminder of the life we had once shared. I bought a ticket for a performance of La Traviata, a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and redemption. As I sat in the darkened theater, the music swelling around me, I was transported to another world, a world of passion and heartbreak. The story on stage mirrored my own, the characters' struggles echoing my own pain and regret. As the final act unfolded, tears streamed down my face. The catharsis was overwhelming, a release of pent-up emotions I had suppressed for so long. In that moment, I realized the full extent of my loss, the devastating consequences of my actions. I had destroyed Vivian, but in doing so, I had also destroyed myself. The revenge I had craved had brought me nothing but emptiness and despair. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had become a monster, consumed by my own vengeance. I had sought to punish Vivian and her lovers, but in doing so, I had inflicted pain and suffering on countless others. I had destroyed careers, shattered reputations, and torn apart families. The collateral damage of my actions was immense, the ripple effects extending far beyond my intended targets. The guilt was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I could no longer ignore the consequences of my choices, the devastation I had wrought. The faces of those I had hurt haunted my dreams, their accusing eyes burning into my soul. I tried to find solace in the anonymity of the city, seeking refuge in the crowds that thronged the streets of Kiev. But there was no escape from the whispers, the knowing glances, the silent judgment. My reputation preceded me, a stain that could never be erased. I sought redemption in the bottle, drowning my sorrows in alcohol. But the relief was fleeting, the hangover a cruel reminder of my failings. The city, once a source of inspiration and joy, now felt like a prison, its every corner filled with memories of the life I had lost. One day, as I wandered aimlessly through the streets, I stumbled upon a small church tucked away in a quiet alley. Drawn by an inexplicable force, I stepped inside. The cool air, the hushed silence, the soft glow of the candles, it all had a calming effect on my troubled soul. I knelt before the altar, my head bowed in prayer. I confessed my sins, my anger, my thirst for revenge. I begged for forgiveness, for redemption, for a chance to start anew. The words tumbled out of me, a torrent of guilt and remorse. As I prayed, a sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't a sudden revelation, a miraculous transformation, but it was a beginning, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. I realized that the path to redemption lay not in dwelling on the past, but in seeking forgiveness and making amends for the harm I had caused. The journey would be long and arduous, filled with challenges and setbacks. But I was determined to make amends, to atone for my sins. I would start by reaching out to those I had hurt, offering my apologies, seeking their forgiveness. It wouldn't erase the past, but it would be a step in the right direction. I left the church with a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of guilt was still there, but it was lighter now, tempered by hope. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it, to embrace the challenges that awaited me. The road to redemption was long and arduous, paved with the jagged stones of regret and remorse. I began by reaching out to those I had hurt, one by one. I wrote letters to Mark and Melissa, expressing my sincere apologies for the pain I had caused. I acknowledged my role in their downfall, my responsibility for their suffering. I didn't expect forgiveness, but I hoped they would at least understand. I also sought out Pierre, the young gallery assistant whose life I had so carelessly disrupted. I found him working in a small bookstore, a shadow of his former self. He was hesitant at first, his eyes filled with suspicion and resentment. But as I spoke, pouring out my heart, his demeanor softened. He listened patiently, his anger gradually giving way to understanding. Reaching out to Vivian was the hardest. I wrote her countless letters, each one torn up and discarded before it could be sent. The words wouldn't come, the apologies felt inadequate. How could I possibly express the depth of my regret, the shame I felt for the way I had treated her? In the end, I decided to seek her out in person. I found her living in a small apartment on the outskirts of Kiev, her once vibrant canvases replaced by somber landscapes. She was thinner, her eyes filled with a sadness that pierced my heart. We talked for hours, the silence punctuated by tears and apologies. I confessed everything, my anger, my jealousy, my thirst for revenge. I laid bare my soul, exposing the darkness that had consumed me. Vivian listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. She acknowledged the pain I had caused, the damage I had inflicted. But she also recognized the remorse in my voice, the genuine desire for redemption. She didn't offer forgiveness, not yet. But she offered a glimmer of hope, a possibility of healing. She told me that she needed time to process the past, time to rebuild her life. She asked me to respect her space, to give her the distance she needed. I left her apartment with a heavy heart, but also with a sense of closure. I had finally confronted the consequences of my actions, the full extent of the damage I had caused. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. I dedicated myself to making amends, to atoning for my sins. I volunteered at a local shelter, offering my architectural skills to help those in need. I donated to charities, supporting causes that Vivian had once championed. I sought therapy, confronting the demons that had driven me to such destructive behavior. The journey was long and arduous, filled with setbacks and temptations. But I persevered, driven by the hope of redemption, the desire to become a better man. I knew I could never erase the past, but I could learn from it, grow from it, and use it to guide me towards a more fulfilling future. In the end, I found a measure of peace, not in forgiveness or absolution, but in acceptance. I accepted my flaws, my mistakes, the darkness that resided within me. I learned to forgive myself, to embrace the imperfect, wounded man I had become. The echoes of deceit still lingered, a faint whisper in the back of my mind, but they no longer defined me. I had found a new purpose, a new path, and as I looked out at the bustling city of Kiev, I felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the world around me. I was no longer a ghost haunting the streets, but a man reborn, ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead.